Hello, and welcome to As Built, the podcast from Graphic Machine about architecture firms, buildings, and how both get built. I'm your co-host, Patience Jones. With me, as ever, is
Brian Jones,
your other co-host. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are talking about what is in a name.
and specifically a firm name.
Yes, not
Just randomly, people's names.
naming as a concept. Discuss. No, what is in a firm name? So 50 years ago, when an architecture firm decided that they wanted to rename themselves or form a new firm and call it something different, there were some considerations. But today, there are way more considerations that you have to think about when you're thinking about renaming.
And especially given the current trend of not using people's names as the primary driver of firm naming. You see some of that still, but then you also see new inventions where non-people names are being used for the firm name.
So in terms of non-people names, part of the reason that this has come about is because firms have longevity that goes beyond, in many cases, the lifespan of the people that the firm was named after. And sometimes the decision is made that it's appropriate to retain their names in some form or fashion. But as the firm goes on and more people are put in charge, it can be a little awkward when everyone in your firm name is deceased and none of the people that are currently keeping it afloat are reflected in the name. And that doesn't even bring into the discussion the aspect of like professional regulations and whether you can or can't use a deceased person's name. So having non-people names is good for that reason. But the other reason it's good to start to think about maybe non-people names is because of URLs. So 50 years ago, an architecture firm didn't need to worry about what will our domain name be when they thought about what their firm name would be. And now you very much do.
It's the always-on consideration for your firm. It's the most likely way that somebody will interact with your firm for the first time. So yeah, it's a really important thing that shouldn't get overlooked as a quick, with a quick wave of the hand.
Well, and it's for your website. It's also for your email address. What is your email address going to be? If your firm name is the name of 6 founding architects, what does that mean for your domain name? What does that mean for your email address? And how easy is it to spell? How easy is it for somebody on the phone to understand what you're saying when you say, oh, my email address is etc. at something.com? Do they have to have you spell it out 4 or 5 times? Do they write it down wrong? That is just one of the concerns.
Yeah, I think there's a bright line here too. When you're thinking up a name and you're starting from nothing and you have the opportunity to come up with something, if the only domain name that is available has a hyphen in it, that's a hard pass. That's the one bright line that I would say exists in this space.
I mean, that's generous to say there's just one bright line.
Well, that I can think of right now.
So many bright lines. Another one is if you decide that you decide on the firm name, you decide on what you think the domain name should be, but the only available domain name ends in something besides .com. It doesn't mean that you can't use that name, but depending on what the TLD, the 3 letters after the dot are, it may be somewhat more difficult to incredibly difficult for you to be found in search, for people to believe that you're a real firm, for browsers, internet browsers that belong to people that you're trying to sell to trust that this is a real site and not some sort of a spam site. There are so many TLDs out there now, like really cutesy ones. Something that people need to be aware of is that TLDs usually go along with either a business type or a country. And so, .sy was Syria. So there were businesses that thought it was really great to be like, oh, this is so cutesy, will be such and such .sy. And then it reads like, something C. Well, that's true. But what's also true is you own a domain name that's owned by the country of Syria. Do you want that? Do you not? These are decisions that you need to think about. The other thing is, if you pick a name that sounds like something that already exists. 50 years ago, it was very clear, like, no, we're such and such architecture firm. Look at our phone book listing, look at our storefront.
Yeah.
Now, if your name is similar to somebody else's, no matter what they do, and your prospect goes online to search for you and they can't find you because this other business that has a very similar name has pages and pages and pages of search results, people are going to give up.
No.
It's too hard to find you.
Well, and the country's, speaking specifically about the United States, the country is a large country with many people. And what may be clever or or unique sounding to you may already exist somewhere else in the country. And it is, or something similar sounding that exists in the country. So definitely doing your research before your heart gets set on something is really critical. And understanding, in your own state, there might be somebody that's already landed on that and just owns it, but isn't using it. So there's a lot of considerations that go into this, but those are the more, technical and operational pieces that operate a name. But at a very top level, confusing people when they're looking for you if there's something else that it sounds like. So if you're using a word that is a common word, in language, that may present a real barrier for people to find you.
You also have to think, because we are now we are much more of a global economy and a global society. Is the name that you're picking or the acronym that you're picking, does it mean something in a foreign language that you do not intend it to mean? And everybody always tosses out, the example of the Chevy Nova. You can't call it the Nova in Spain because it means it doesn't go. So have you researched what you're thinking of calling yourself extensively? And have you looked to see if anybody else owns a trademark for that name, whether they're an architecture firm or not? Because one, you may want to trademark your name at some point, but you can't do if somebody else owns it. And two, you really don't want to get sued for trademark infringement. That's just bad. So again, 50 years ago, we had fewer businesses in the world. We had fewer people that had registered for trademarks. It was harder to find somebody that was competing against you. Now it's really easy.
Yep.
So you have to take all of those things into account. And it's not just as simple as like, wouldn't it be cool if our web address was, whatever, .com? Like,
that's not enough.
I mean, maybe that would be cool.
The other thing, and this is a personal anecdote, is that if you are using words that are also vocal commands and your, for your phone or your other automated devices, that may present an issue with getting found and being accessible through vocal commands and voice search. So just, a little helpful hint. That's something to be aware of.
Yes. I mean, people are using voice search more than they ever have, and they will continue to. And it just becomes one more thing that you have to think about. Okay, how does this sound?
And voice search is a part of everything at this point, because even if you're on any platform, there's a voice component of it because of accessibility items and because it's convenient. So just be aware that it isn't just about interacting with your, device's assistant. It's also about everything.
Yeah. That being said, probably don't name your firm SIRI or ALEXA. And there are still all of the same considerations that, go into okay, how does how will the name look on a sign, and how will it look on a business card? And all of that is true. You just also have all of these new components that you have to consider because other people will.
Yep. So big takeaways.
We're going to put a list on our website,
cool,
in the show notes, of all the things that you have to think about when you're thinking about a name. And so if you're thinking about renaming yourself or you're starting a new firm and you're trying to come up with a name, go through this checklist and we'll put resources in there. There's a lot of free tools online where you can check to see availability of things. It is far better to do it early and ahead of time before you start to invest money in the transition to this new name and then find out, oh my gosh, when you say it out loud, it sounds, obscene, or somebody down the street has something that's very similar. Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you, and we will see you next time.